I'm Caitlin, 37, and last Christmas, my world shattered when my mother Patricia looked my daughter Riley in the eyes and said, "You're not my granddaughter, get out." 8 years of building our family through adoption crumbled in that moment. Riley's face, God, I'll never forget how her expression collapsed as the words hit her. What my mother didn't realize was that her cruel outburst would unearth secrets that had been buried for decades, and set us all on a path that none of us expected. Before I continue this painful family story, let me know where you're watching from in the comments below, and hit that subscribe button if you want more real stories about family challenges and healing. To understand why those words cut so deeply, you need to know our story. I grew up in a traditional household with my parents, Patricia and George. My mother was always strict about appearances and proper behavior, the type who color-coordinated Christmas decorations and expected perfect manners at the dinner table. Growing up, I both feared and desperately sought her approval. When I married Michael at 28, we immediately started planning our family. We'd met in college, dated for 5 years, and both wanted children. My mother was thrilled, constantly hinting about wanting grandchildren. "Your cousin Jennifer already has 2, she'd say during our weekly calls. What she didn't know was that each of those calls felt like a knife twisting deeper. For 5 years, we tried everything. I still remember the sterile smell of the fertility clinic waiting room, the calendar tracking my cycles, the hopeful pregnancy tests that always showed one cruel line instead of 2. 3 miscarriages later, each one more devastating than the last, I hit my breaking point. "I can't do this anymore," I told Michael one night, curled up in our bed after we'd lost our 3rd pregnancy at 14 weeks. "I can't keep hoping and losing." Michael, always my rock, held me while I sobbed. "There are other ways to build our family," he whispered against my hair. We spent months researching adoption. We attended information sessions, connected with other adoptive families, and finally submitted our application. The home studies and background checks were invasive but necessary. My mother's reaction, when we told her, was lukewarm at best. "Are you sure you want to raise someone else's child?" she asked, her nose slightly wrinkled. "You never know what kind of problems they might have." I should have seen the warning signs then. 9 months later, ironically the length of a pregnancy, we got the call about Riley. She was 7 years old with curly brown hair and eyes that held too much sadness for a child. Her parents had died in a car accident when she was 5, and she'd bounced between 3 foster homes since then. The first time we met her at the agency, she sat quietly with her small backpack clutched to her chest. She answered our questions politely, but didn't make eye contact. "Do you like to draw?" Michael asked, noticing the colored pencil tucked behind her ear. Riley nodded slightly, then reached into her backpack and pulled out a small sketchbook. She carefully opened it to a detailed drawing of a puppy. "That's amazing," I said genuinely. "You're really talented." For the first time, she looked directly at me, a tiny smile forming. That was the moment I knew she was our daughter. The adjustment period wasn't easy. Riley had nightmares for months. She'd wake up screaming for parents, who were never coming back. Some nights she'd hide food under her bed, afraid there wouldn't be enough tomorrow. Each behavior was a scar from her past, and we worked through them one by one. When we first brought Riley to meet my parents, Patricia greeted her with a stiff pat on the head, like she was a neighbor's dog rather than her granddaughter. George was warmer, at least asking about her interests, and showing her his collection of model trains. "She seems nice enough," my mother said afterward when Riley was out of earshot. "But don't you think you'll want real children of your own someday?" Michael's parents were entirely different. His mother Janet immediately swept Riley into a hug, and had already prepared a bedroom for her visits, decorated with art supplies after hearing about her interest in drawing. His father Robert took her fishing and proudly displayed her artwork on their refrigerator. Despite the uneven grandparent relationships, Riley thrived. The quiet, withdrawn child blossomed into a thoughtful, creative teen. She maintained straight A's despite having gaps in her early education from moving between foster homes. Her art teacher suggested advanced classes after seeing her portfolio. But through the years, my mother's subtle digs continued. She'd send us newspaper clippings about scientific breakthroughs in fertility treatments. When she gave Christmas gifts, Riley's were always noticeably less expensive than my brother Thomas's children's presents. She'd make comments like, "Your cousin's baby has George's nose, isn't family resemblance fascinating?" while looking directly at Riley. I tried talking to her about it multiple times. "Mom, Riley is my daughter in every way that matters," I'd insist. "Of course, dear," she'd reply with a dismissive wave. "I'm just saying blood connections are special." After each visit, I'd check in with Riley. "How are you feeling about Grandma Patricia?" Riley, wise beyond her years, would shrug. "She doesn't like me much, but that's okay. Grandma Janet makes up for it." I admired her resilience while hating that she needed it. Michael was my constant ally. "We can limit the visits," he'd suggest after particularly tense family gatherings. But completely cutting off contact seemed extreme. After all, Patricia never said anything explicitly cruel, at least not until that Christmas. Christmas in our family had always been a production. Growing up, my mother insisted on matching outfits for holiday photos and carefully choreographed gift opening. As adults, the tradition evolved to rotating hosting duties between me and my brother Thomas. Thomas and his wife Jessica had 3 biological children, twin 10-year-old boys and a 6-year-old girl. My mother doted on them shamelessly, always commenting on how the twins had the family chin, or how little Emma had Patricia's artistic talent. It was exhausting to watch. This particular Christmas was different. My father George had suffered a mild heart attack in October, and my mother insisted on hosting at their house, in case the excitement becomes too much for him. The real reason, I suspected, was maintaining control over the environment. Riley, now 15, had been working on a special gift for weeks, a handcrafted photo album documenting family moments from the past 8 years. She'd collected photos, designed elaborate layouts, and written heartfelt captions about each memory. "Do you think Grandma Patricia will like it?" she asked, carefully wrapping the album in silver paper. "She'll love it," I assured her, while anxiety knotted my stomach. The truth was, I couldn't predict my mother's reaction to anything. Michael squeezed my shoulder as we packed the car with gifts and food. "We're a united front," he reminded me. "Whatever happens, we handle it together." I nodded, grateful for his steady presence. After 8 years, Riley was finally feeling secure in our family. She'd stopped having nightmares, had close friends at school, and had recently started calling us Mom and Dad consistently instead of by our first names. I didn't want anything to disrupt her progress. The drive to my parents' suburban home took 40 minutes. Riley sat in the back seat with headphones, occasionally humming along to her music. "Remember when she wouldn't make a sound in the car?" Michael whispered, catching my eye. I smiled at the memory. When we first adopted Riley, she'd sit rigidly during car rides, staring out the window in silence. Now she was singing softly, her feet tapping against her suitcase. My mother greeted us at the door in a perfectly pressed red dress, her silver hair swept into an elegant updo. "You're early," she said, checking her watch. "I haven't finished setting the table." "We came early to help," I explained, handing her the sweet potato casserole I'd made. She examined the dish with a critical eye. "Did you use brown sugar or white?" "You know your father prefers brown." And so it began. Riley stepped forward with a carefully wrapped gift. I brought something for you and Grandpa George, Grandma Patricia. My mother's smile tightened. How thoughtful. You can put it under the tree with the others. George appeared in the hallway, his face lighting up at the sight of Riley. There's my girl. Come see what I've been building in the basement. Riley grinned and followed him downstairs to see his latest model train addition. At least my father made an effort, though he rarely contradicted my mother directly. The next few hours passed in a blur of food preparation and decoration adjustments. My mother micromanaged every detail, from the placement of napkins to the temperature of the gravy. When Thomas's family arrived an hour later, the atmosphere shifted dramatically. There they are, my mother exclaimed, rushing to embrace her biological grandchildren. Connor, Logan, look how tall you've gotten. And Emma, what a beautiful dress. The contrast in her greeting was painful to witness. Riley noticed it too. I caught her watching the interaction from the doorway, her expression carefully neutral. Riley, come help me in the kitchen, I called, wanting to give her an escape. As we chopped vegetables side by side, Riley whispered, "It's okay, Mom. I'm used to it." The fact that she felt the need to comfort me broke my heart all over again. Thomas's wife Jessica at least made an effort, asking Riley about her art classes and complimenting her new haircut. Thomas himself was polite, but distant, mirroring our mother's behavior in a less obvious way. Dinner will be served in 20 minutes, my mother announced at exactly 5:40 p.m. Everyone should wash up and take their assigned seats. Michael caught my eye across the room and raised an eyebrow. Assigned seats. Of course. I shouldn't have been surprised to find Riley placed at the far end of the table, next to Emma and away from the adults. Michael and I were separated, with him next to my father and me beside Thomas. Another strategic move by Patricia to minimize our unified front. The dining room gleamed with Patricia's best china and crystal. A massive centerpiece of pine branches, red berries, and white candles dominated the table, making it difficult to see the person sitting opposite. Classical Christmas music played softly from hidden speakers, and the fireplace crackled with a perfectly maintained fire. Before we eat, Patricia announced, "Let's exchange a few gifts." This was new, normally presents came after dinner. I glanced at Michael, who shrugged subtly. I thought it would be nice for the children to open one gift each, my mother explained, emphasizing children, while looking at Connor, Logan, and Emma. Riley sat quietly, hands folded in her lap. Actually, I said, Riley has something special she'd like to give you and Dad. Riley perked up, reaching for the silver-wrapped package beside her chair. How thoughtful, my mother said with a tight smile. Why don't you go first then? Riley carefully brought the gift to my parents. I made this for both of you. It took a long time. My father accepted the package with genuine interest, while my mother watched impassively. As they unwrapped it together, I held my breath. The album was stunning, leather-bound with "Our Family" embossed on the cover. The first page showed a picture of Riley's adoption day, all of us standing outside the courthouse with massive smiles. Look at all these wonderful memories, my father said, turning the pages slowly. Here's the fishing trip where you caught that monster bass. My mother's lips pressed into a thin line as she scanned the pages. Very creative, she said finally, closing the album and setting it aside without examining the rest. Thank you, Riley. Riley's face fell momentarily before she composed herself. There are 8 years of pictures in there. I wrote about each one. We'll look at it more closely later, my mother replied dismissively before turning to her biological grandchildren. Now, for Connor and Logan, I have something special. She proceeded to present the twins with expensive gaming systems while Emma received a child-sized vanity complete with real makeup. Riley watched silently as the other children exclaimed over their gifts. "And for Riley," my mother eventually said, producing a small, plainly wrapped package. "A journal for your drawings." It was a simple spiral notebook, the kind you'd pick up at a drugstore for school supplies. Nothing like the professional artist sketchbooks Riley actually used. "Thank you, Grandma Patricia," Riley said politely, placing the notebook beside her plate. My blood boiled, but before I could say anything, my mother announced it was time to eat. The servants she'd hired for the evening began bringing out steaming dishes of traditional holiday food. As we ate, the conversation inevitably turned to family traits and histories. "Connor's science aptitude clearly comes from my side," my mother said proudly. "The Williams family has produced 3 generations of doctors. And Logan has George's mechanical mind," she continued. "Remember how you used to take apart radios as a boy, dear?" My father nodded, looking uncomfortable with the direction of the conversation. "What about you, Riley?" Jessica asked kindly. "Where do you think your artistic talent comes from?" An innocent question with no malicious intent, but I felt myself tense. "I don't know," Riley answered thoughtfully. "My birth mom liked to draw too, I think. I don't remember much about her." My mother sniffed. "Well, it certainly isn't from our family. None of the Williamses have the artistic gene." An awkward silence fell over the table. Riley, trying to navigate the tension, asked, "Actually, I've been wondering about family medical history for a school project. Do the Williamses have any health conditions I should know about?" It was a reasonable question. We'd always been open with Riley about her adoption, but practical matters like medical history were important. My mother set down her fork with a clatter. "Why would you need to know about Williams' family medical history?" "For school," Riley repeated. "We're creating family health trees to understand genetic conditions." "But you're not genetically a Williams," my mother said sharply. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. "Mom," I warned quietly. "What?" "It's true," she insisted. "These things matter. Blood matters." "Patricia," my father murmured, placing a hand on her arm. She shook him off. "No, George. I'm tired of pretending. Family is family. Blood is blood." Riley looked down at her plate, her cheeks flushing with embarrassment. Thomas cleared his throat. "Mom, maybe this isn't the time." "When is the time?" she snapped. "When do we acknowledge reality?" Dessert arrived at that moment, my mother's famous apple pie with homemade ice cream. As the server placed generous slices in front of each person, I noticed Riley's portion was noticeably smaller than the others. Riley, who loved my mother's pie despite everything, looked at her tiny slice and then at the heaping portions the other grandchildren received. "Excuse me," she said softly. "Could I please have a normal-sized piece? This is very small." It was such a simple request, politely stated. What happened next plays in my nightmares. My mother's face contorted with sudden rage. "You want more? You think you're entitled to more? You're not my granddaughter. Get out." The words exploded across the table like a bomb. Every face froze in shock. Riley's expression crumpled, her eyes instantly filling with tears. Her mouth opened slightly, but no sound came out. I couldn't move. Couldn't breathe. Couldn't process what had just happened. Michael recovered first, immediately rising and moving to Riley's side, placing a protective arm around her shoulders. "What did you just say?" I finally whispered, my voice shaking. "I said the truth," my mother replied, chin raised defiantly. "I'm tired of pretending." Riley let out a small, broken sob and bolted from the table, running toward the guest room. "Riley, wait." I called, finally breaking free from my paralysis. Let her go, my mother said dismissively. I'm just being honest. Blood is blood. She's not family. My father stared at his plate, saying nothing. Thomas and Jessica exchanged uncomfortable glances. Their children looked confused and frightened. Michael stood, his normally gentle face hard with anger. We're leaving, he announced. Now. I found Riley in the guest bedroom, curled into herself on the edge of the bed. Her shoulders shook with silent sobs. When I sat beside her, she flinched slightly before recognizing my touch. Baby, I'm so sorry, I whispered, pulling her into my arms. She felt small again, like the 7-year-old we'd first met. Why does she hate me? Riley asked between sobs. What did I do wrong? Nothing, I said fiercely. You did absolutely nothing wrong. This is about her, not you. Her tears soaked through my sweater as I held her, my own anger building with each passing second. This was my child, my beautiful, kind, talented daughter, and no one had the right to hurt her this way. Michael appeared in the doorway, already holding our coats and bags. His efficiency in crisis was something I'd always admired. I've packed everything, he said quietly. We can go whenever you're ready. Riley wiped her eyes with her sleeve. I want to leave, she whispered. Then we leave, I agreed, helping her stand. In the living room, my mother sat regally in her armchair, as if she hadn't just detonated our family. My father stood awkwardly by the fireplace, looking anywhere but at us. Thomas and Jessica were speaking in hushed tones in the corner while their children watched a holiday movie with the volume turned high, an obvious attempt to distract them. We're leaving, I announced, my voice steadier than I felt. My mother looked up with an expression of mild surprise. Don't be dramatic, Caitlin. Sit down and finish your dessert. Dramatic? I repeated incredulously. You just told my daughter she's not family and to get out of your house. I was simply being honest, she replied. The girl should know where she stands. The girl, Michael said with quiet intensity, is our daughter. Her name is Riley. My father finally stepped forward. Patricia, perhaps you should apologize. It is Christmas, after all. The suggestion was so inadequate, I almost laughed. An apology for deeply wounding a child. Because it's Christmas. I have nothing to apologize for, my mother insisted. Family is family. Blood is blood. I've never felt comfortable with this arrangement. Arrangement? I echoed, my voice rising. You mean my daughter? My family? It's not natural, she continued, as if I hadn't spoken. Thomas and Jessica have real children. Enough. I shouted, surprising even myself. I never raised my voice, especially not to my mother. Riley is my real daughter. She has been for 8 years. If you can't accept that, then you don't accept me. Thomas finally spoke up, though not in the way I'd hoped. Caitlin, you're overreacting. Mom's just old-fashioned. She didn't mean. She meant exactly what she said, Michael cut in. And she's been saying it in 100 small ways for years. We've just been too willing to excuse it. Riley stood close to Michael, her face partially hidden against his side, but her eyes on me. I saw something in her expression I couldn't quite identify, fear, yes, but also a question. What would I do? Whose side was I really on? In that moment, I knew I couldn't waffle or compromise. Not anymore. We're going home, I said firmly, taking Riley's hand. And until there's a genuine apology and change of heart, we won't be back. You'd choose her over your own mother? Patricia asked incredulously. Every time, I replied without hesitation. She is my child, Mom. If you can't see that, it's your loss. We walked out into the cold December night, the sound of Christmas carols still playing faintly behind us. The drive home was painfully quiet. Riley stared out the window, occasionally wiping away silent tears. Michael kept reaching back to squeeze her knee reassuringly while navigating the dark roads. When we were about halfway home, Riley finally spoke. "Am I really not part of the family?" she asked in a small voice. I turned in my seat to face her. "You are the heart of our family, Riley. Don't ever doubt that." She nodded slightly, but didn't look convinced. "But Grandma Patricia is wrong," Michael said firmly. "Family isn't just DNA. It's love and choice and commitment." When we arrived home, Riley went straight to her room and closed the door. I stood in the hallway, uncertain whether to follow or give her space. "Let her process," Michael advised, gently leading me to the kitchen. "She knows we're here when she's ready." We sat at the kitchen table, the house eerily quiet, without the holiday music and conversation we'd expected to fill the evening. "What do we do now?" I asked, feeling utterly lost. "We protect our daughter," he answered simply. "Whatever that takes." My phone buzzed with a text from Thomas. "Mom's upset. Think you overreacted. Call when you've calmed down." I showed it to Michael, who snorted in disbelief. Overreacted to having our daughter told she's not family and should leave. I'd like to see how he'd respond if someone said that to one of his kids. "Should I reply?" I asked. "Not tonight," he advised. "Nothing productive will come from it right now." We went to bed but barely slept. Around midnight, I heard Riley's door open and her quiet footsteps moving toward the kitchen. I found her sitting in the dark, a glass of water untouched before her. "Can't sleep?" I asked, sliding into the chair opposite her. She shook her head. "Every time I close my eyes, I hear her voice." I reached for her hand. "I'm so sorry, sweetheart. So sorry she hurt you." "Is it true?" Riley asked, her voice breaking. "Am I always going to be an outsider? Not really family?" The pain in her question broke my heart all over again. "No, baby. That's not true. Family isn't just who gives birth to you. It's who loves you, who shows up, who stays." "But blood does matter to some people," she persisted. "Maybe Grandma Patricia is just saying what others think, but don't say." "Then those people are wrong," I said firmly. "And they don't deserve to be in your life." Riley looked down at our joined hands. "Would it be easier if you had a biological child? Someone who looked like you and had your blood?" "No," I said without hesitation. "It would be different, but not better. Not easier. You are exactly the child I was meant to have, Riley. I've never doubted that for a second." The next few days passed in a haze of concern. Riley stayed in her room most of the time, emerging only for meals. She declined calls from friends and skipped her usual drawing time. When I suggested we watch her favorite movie, she shrugged and said she wasn't in the mood. I'd never seen her so withdrawn, not even in those early days after the adoption. Then, she'd been scared but hopeful. Now, she seemed defeated in a way that terrified me. Michael and I discussed our options late into each night. Should we cut contact completely, he wondered. I don't know, I admitted. Part of me wants to never see my mother again. But is that the right choice for Riley long term? What about therapy, he suggested. For Riley, definitely. But maybe for all of us. I nodded slowly. I'll make some calls tomorrow. My phone continued to accumulate messages, more from Thomas suggesting I was overreacting, one from my father asking vaguely if things could be worked out, and nothing from my mother. Not that I expected an apology, but her silence spoke volumes. By New Year's Eve, I was resolved. We needed to address this situation definitively, one way or another. I couldn't let Riley continue living in this limbo, questioning her place in our family and the world. 3 days into January, with Riley still subdued and withdrawn, I made an appointment with a family therapist who specialized in adoption issues. Dr. Brennan had a warm office with comfortable chairs and plants in every corner. She listened intently as I explained the situation. "How is Riley coping now?" she asked. "She's withdrawn," I said. "Quieter than I've ever seen her. She's stopped drawing, which has always been her outlet." Dr. Brennan nodded thoughtfully. "And what about you? How are you handling this?" The question caught me off guard. I'd been so focused on Riley that I hadn't really considered my own feelings. "I'm angry," I admitted. "Heartbroken for Riley. And confused about how to move forward." "These are all valid reactions," she assured me. "Would you be open to bringing Riley in for a session? And perhaps your husband as well?" I agreed immediately, relieved to have some direction. That evening, as I was explaining the therapy appointment to Michael, my phone rang with an unfamiliar number. "Caitlin. It's your father." I stiffened immediately. "Dad. I'd like to meet with you," he said, his voice uncharacteristically firm. "Just you. Tomorrow morning at the coffee mill downtown." "I don't think." "Please," he interrupted. "There's something you need to know. Something important." Curiosity overcame my reluctance. "Fine. 10 o'clock. The next morning, I found my father already seated in a corner booth at the coffee shop, looking older than I'd ever seen him. His hands trembled slightly as he lifted his cup. "Thank you for coming," he said as I slid into the seat across from him. "What's this about, Dad?" I asked, too emotionally drained for small talk. He took a deep breath. "There's something you don't know about your mother. Something that explains, though doesn't excuse, her behavior." I waited silently. "Your mother was adopted," he said simply. The words didn't register at first. "What?" "Patricia was adopted as an infant," he repeated. "Her parents, your grandparents, never told her. She found out accidentally when she was 16. She was looking for her birth certificate for a school project and found her adoption papers instead." I sat back, stunned. "Mom is adopted. How is that possible?" "She's always talked about William's family traits and blood connections. All an elaborate fiction," my father said sadly. "After she discovered the truth, she became obsessed with belonging. She created family stories and traditions. She researched her adoptive family's genealogy extensively, memorizing every detail, as if it could make her genetic connection real. But why didn't I know this? Why keep it secret?" He looked ashamed. "It was her deepest trauma, Caitlin. Her parents handled the discovery terribly, told her she should be grateful they took her in, that it didn't change anything, that she shouldn't make a fuss. They refused to give her any information about her birth parents. So she spent her whole life feeling like an imposter," I whispered, pieces falling into place. "Yes. When you adopted Riley, it triggered something in her. She saw herself in Riley, I think. All her unresolved feelings about her own adoption surfaced." "That doesn't excuse what she said," I insisted. "No, it doesn't," he agreed immediately. "What she said was cruel and inexcusable. I should have stepped in years ago, confronted her behavior. My silence makes me complicit, and I'm deeply sorry for that." He looked directly at me, his eyes watery. I'm asking for a chance to make things right, with you and with Riley. Your mother needs help, Caitlin. This secret has poisoned her for decades. I felt overwhelmed with conflicting emotions, anger at the hurt caused to Riley, shock at this revelation, and a complicated sympathy for my mother that I wasn't quite ready to acknowledge. I need to think about this, I said finally. And I need to talk to my therapist and Michael before making any decisions. My father nodded. I understand. But please know I love Riley. I've always seen her as my granddaughter, even if I've been too weak to stand up to your mother. I left the coffee shop in a daze, my mind racing. My mother, the woman who'd preached about blood connections and family traits my entire life, was adopted. The irony was almost too much to process. At home, I shared everything with Michael, who listened with increasing amazement. That explains so much, he said when I finished. But it doesn't excuse it. No, I agreed. But it helps me understand. We decided to discuss it with Dr. Brennan before talking to Riley. In our session the next day, the therapist provided valuable perspective. This information gives context to your mother's behavior, she said. It sounds like she has unresolved trauma around her own adoption. However, that doesn't make her treatment of Riley acceptable. If you decide to attempt reconciliation, clear boundaries will be essential. We scheduled a session for Riley, who reluctantly agreed to go. After her individual appointment, Dr. Brennan suggested a joint session, where we could carefully share the new information about Patricia. I think Riley should know, she advised. Not to excuse her grandmother's behavior, but to understand it isn't about her personally. That evening, Michael and I sat down with Riley in our living room. She'd been drawing again, a small but significant improvement. We need to talk about Grandma Patricia, I started gently. Riley's pencil stilled. I don't want to see her again. You don't have to do anything you're not comfortable with, Michael assured her. But there's something we learned that might help you understand why she acted the way she did. I carefully explained what my father had told me. Riley listened intently, her expression shifting from hurt to confusion to something like recognition. When I finished, she was quiet for a long moment. So she's like me, she finally said. She was adopted too. Yes, I confirmed. Though her experience was very different from yours. We've always been open with you about your adoption. She discovered hers by accident, and was told to never speak of it. Riley considered this. That's really sad, she said finally. To find out that way and then be told to pretend it never happened. Her compassion, even after everything, amazed me. It doesn't make what she said okay, Michael emphasized. Her pain doesn't give her the right to hurt you. I know, Riley nodded. But I understand better now. She's hurting like I was hurting. Like you were hurting? I asked. Riley looked down at her sketchbook. When I first came to live with you, I was so scared of not belonging. Of being sent away again. Sometimes I still get scared. My heart constricted. Oh, Riley. But you and Dad always make me feel like I belong, she continued. Maybe Grandma Patricia never had that. The insight from my 15-year-old daughter left me speechless. Michael reached over and squeezed her hand. What do you want to do now? He asked gently. Riley thought for a moment. I think maybe we should try to help her. Not right away. I'm still hurt. But someday. After consulting further with Dr. Brennan, we decided to write a letter to my parents. I spent days drafting it, trying to find the right balance between compassion and firm boundaries. The final version acknowledged my mother's pain, while making it clear that her treatment of Riley was unacceptable. I outlined conditions for moving forward, an honest apology to Riley, family therapy sessions, and a commitment to treating Riley as a full member of the family, not just in words, but in actions. I mailed the letter and waited, trying not to hold my breath for a response that might never come. A week later, my father called. "We'd like to come to your house," he said quietly. "To talk. If Riley is comfortable with that." I discussed it with Riley first. "It's completely your decision," I assured her. "We can say no." She thought about it carefully. "I want to try," she decided. "But can you and Dad stay with me the whole time?" "Absolutely," Michael promised. "We're a package deal." We scheduled the meeting for the following Sunday. I spent the morning stress cleaning the house, while Michael baked Riley's favorite cookies, a normal activity that brought some comfort to the tense day. When the doorbell rang at exactly 2 o'clock, Riley was sitting between Michael and me on the couch, her posture rigid with anxiety. I gave her hand a reassuring squeeze before going to answer the door. My parents stood on the porch, my mother looking uncharacteristically disheveled. Her usually perfect hair was simply pulled back, and she wore minimal makeup. My father stood protectively beside her, his hand on her elbow. "Thank you for seeing us," he said quietly. I nodded and led them into the living room. My mother stopped abruptly when she saw Riley, her composure visibly faltering. "Hello, Riley," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Hi, Grandma Patricia," Riley replied cautiously. We all sat awkwardly, the adults perched on the edges of chairs while Riley remained securely between Michael and me on the couch. "I believe Patricia has something to say," my father prompted gently. My mother took a shaky breath. "I owe you an apology," she began, looking directly at Riley for perhaps the first time ever. "What I said to you was cruel and untrue. You didn't deserve it." Riley watched her silently. "Your father told you about me?" my mother asked, glancing at me. I nodded. "Yes." She closed her eyes briefly. "It's not an excuse. Nothing excuses hurting a child. But I've spent my whole life feeling like an imposter in my own family. When Caitlin adopted you, it brought up everything I'd tried to bury." To my shock, tears began streaming down my mother's face. I'd never seen her cry before, not when her own parents died, not at any family milestone. "Every time I looked at you," she continued, her voice breaking, "I saw myself. The girl who didn't belong. The outsider. And instead of helping you feel included, I pushed you away, because it was too painful to face my own past." Riley leaned forward slightly. "Did it hurt when you found out?" she asked simply. The question, so direct, so empathetic, seemed to pierce right through my mother's carefully constructed walls. "Yes," she whispered. "It felt like my entire life was a lie. Like I didn't know who I was anymore." Riley nodded understanding. "I used to feel that way too. Like I didn't know who I was supposed to be." "How did you get past it?" my mother asked, and for the first time, I heard genuine curiosity in her voice. "Mom and Dad," Riley said, glancing at us. "They never made me feel like I had to be someone else to be loved. They just loved me as I am." My mother's hands twisted in her lap. "I'd like to learn how to do that," she admitted. "If you're willing to give me another chance." "I understand if you're not." Riley considered this carefully. "I think I need some time," she said honestly. "But I'd like to try someday." My mother nodded, accepting this boundary. "Thank you for even considering it. I wouldn't blame you if you never wanted to see me again." "We were thinking," my father interjected, "that perhaps we could all attend some therapy sessions together. Dr. Brennan suggested it might help." "You've spoken to Dr. Brennan?" I asked, surprised. "We've had 2 sessions," my father confirmed. "It was Patricia's idea. Another shock. My mother, who'd always dismissed therapy as nonsense for people too weak to handle their problems, had voluntarily sought help. I think therapy together could be good, Michael said. With clear boundaries and expectations. We agreed to start with monthly family sessions, with individual therapy continuing in between. As my parents prepared to leave, my mother hesitated by the door. Riley, she said softly. I saw the rest of your photo album. It's beautiful. You're very talented. A small olive branch, but an important one. Thank you, Riley replied, the hint of a smile touching her lips. After they left, Riley exhaled heavily. That was intense. You were amazing, I told her, pulling her into a hug. How are you feeling? Weird, she admitted. Sad for Grandma Patricia. Still hurt. But also hopeful, maybe. Michael joined our hug. Healing takes time. There's no rush. That night, I found Riley in her room, sketching intently. She'd drawn a family tree, but instead of the traditional branching design, she'd created a complex web of interconnected circles. What's this? I asked. It's for my project, she explained. But I'm redesigning it. The old tree design doesn't work for families like ours. Or for Grandma Patricia's family. I looked closer and saw that each circle contained a name, all of us, including my parents, Michael's parents, even Riley's birth parents represented by question marks. Family is complicated, she said, adding more connecting lines between circles. But that doesn't make it less real. Out of the mouths of babes, I thought, marveling at her wisdom. The next months brought gradual, sometimes painful progress. Our first family therapy session with Dr. Brennan was awkward, with long silences and careful, measured responses. My mother struggled to articulate her feelings, decades of suppression making vulnerability nearly impossible. By the third session, something shifted. Dr. Brennan asked Patricia to speak directly to Riley about her own adoption experience. I was 16, my mother began haltingly. I needed my birth certificate for a driver's license application. My mother, your great-grandmother, was out shopping. I knew the certificate was in her filing cabinet. She described finding a folder labeled with her name, expecting to find a birth certificate, but instead discovering adoption papers. I remember sitting on the floor, reading the same words over and over. Child surrendered by biological mother. Adoption finalized. There was a different name on the original birth certificate. Margaret Ann Campbell. Not Patricia Williams. Riley listened intently as my mother described confronting her parents, their dismissive response, their insistence that she should be grateful and never speak of it again. After that, I became obsessed with belonging, she admitted. I studied our family history, memorized genealogy charts, noted every family resemblance anyone mentioned. If I couldn't be related by blood, I'd make myself more Williams than the Williamses. That sounds really lonely, Riley observed quietly. My mother looked startled, as if this perspective had never occurred to her. Yes, she said after a moment. It was incredibly lonely. In our fifth session, Dr. Brennan suggested that my mother apologize to Riley again, this time with more specificity about the harm she'd caused. Riley, my mother began, visibly uncomfortable but committed, I've treated you unfairly from the beginning. I made you feel unwelcome in the family. I gave you less attention, less affection, less generous gifts than your cousins. I made comments that undermined your place in our family. And then at Christmas, I said something unforgivable. She took a deep breath. I'm truly sorry for all of it. You deserved a grandmother who celebrated you, not one who made you feel like an outsider. I'd like to try to be that grandmother now, if you'll give me the chance. Riley considered this carefully. I think I'd like that, she said finally. But I need you to really see me. Not as someone who reminds you of your pain, but as just me. Riley. I'll try, my mother promised. I can't guarantee I'll never make mistakes, but I promise to try. It was the most honest exchange they'd ever had. In early May, George called with a tentative suggestion. Patricia was wondering if you might all come for dinner this weekend. A small gathering, just us. A sort of do-over. I discussed it with Michael and Riley. What do you think? I asked her. No pressure either way. I think I'm ready to try, Riley decided. But can I bring my sketchbook? Just in case I need a break. Absolutely, Michael assured her. The dinner was nothing like Christmas. My mother had prepared Riley's favorite pasta dish rather than an elaborate traditional meal. The formal dining room was bypassed for the cozier kitchen table. No assigned seating, no elaborate centerpieces blocking conversation. Most strikingly, my mother had cleared her collection of porcelain figurines from the display cabinet and replaced them with Riley's artwork from over the years, pieces she'd apparently saved despite her seeming indifference. You kept these? Riley asked, examining a clay sculpture she'd made in 4th grade. Every one, my mother confirmed. I just didn't know how to show appreciation properly. After dinner, instead of orchestrating a formal dessert service, my mother asked Riley if she'd like to help make sundaes. I remember you like butterscotch on vanilla, she said, pulling out ice cream and toppings. You remembered that? Riley asked, surprised. I've noticed more than I've shown, my mother admitted. Later, as Riley helped dry dishes, my mother asked about her current art projects. For the first time, Riley enthusiastically shared details about her portfolio development for advanced placement art classes. My mother listened attentively, asking genuine questions. Would you show me some of your recent work? She asked. Your grandfather mentioned you're working with watercolors now. Riley retrieved her sketchbook, initially cautious, but growing animated as she explained her techniques. My mother listened with genuine interest, occasionally asking thoughtful questions. As we prepared to leave, my mother hesitantly approached Riley. I was wondering if you might be interested in painting together sometime. I used to enjoy watercolors myself, though I'm terribly out of practice. You paint? Riley asked, clearly surprised. I did, many years ago, my mother admitted. I stopped because my parents, your great-grandparents, didn't consider it a productive use of time. I'd like that, Riley said, a tentative smile forming. In the car, Riley was quieter than usual, processing the evening. You okay? I asked gently. She nodded. It felt different this time. Like she actually sees me. She's trying, Michael observed. That's all we can ask. Over the summer, Riley and my mother began meeting bi-weekly for painting sessions. Sometimes they worked in comfortable silence, other times, conversation flowed more easily than it ever had before. My mother began sharing stories from her youth, real stories, not the carefully curated versions she'd always presented. During one session, Patricia showed Riley some of her own teenage artwork, preserved in an old portfolio. I see where Riley gets her talent, I commented, genuinely impressed by my mother's youthful work. Maybe it is in the blood after all, my mother said with a small smile, just not in the way I always thought. It was a joke, a small one, but significant coming from her. An acknowledgement that our connections transcended biology. Family therapy continued monthly, and while progress wasn't linear, the overall trajectory was positive. My father became more assertive, no longer allowing my mother's occasional sharp comments to pass unchallenged. Thomas and his family joined a session, leading to important conversations about how the cousins' relationships could be strengthened. By Thanksgiving, almost a year after the Christmas disaster, the change was remarkable. We hosted the holiday at our house, with both sets of grandparents attending. Janet and Robert, always warm with Riley, welcomed Patricia and George with genuine friendliness. As we gathered around the table, I watched my mother help Riley arrange her place cards, decorated with small watercolor paintings they'd created together. "These are beautiful," my mother said, adjusting one slightly. "You've taught me so much about composition." Riley beamed at the praise. "Thanks, Grandma Patricia. I think we make a good team." "Yes," my mother agreed softly. "I think we do." When everyone was seated, my father raised his glass. "I'd like to propose a toast," he said. "To family, in all its forms. And to second chances." My mother reached over and squeezed Riley's hand. "To second chances," she echoed. As I looked around the table, at Michael's steady presence, at Riley's bright smile, at my parents' evident efforts to repair what had been broken, I felt a profound gratitude. The worst moment of last Christmas had ultimately led to healing none of us could have anticipated. "Mom?" Riley whispered as the conversation continued around us. "I'm really glad we didn't give up on Grandma Patricia." "Me too, sweetheart," I replied. "Me too." 6 months later, the transformation in our family continued to amaze me. Regular therapy had become part of our routine, sometimes as a family, sometimes in various smaller groupings. The tools we'd learned for communication and boundary setting had improved not just the relationship between Riley and my mother, but all our family dynamics. Patricia had embraced her role as a grandmother with a dedication that surprised everyone. She'd begun attending Riley's art shows, sitting proudly in the front row, and engaging thoughtfully with her work. For Riley's 16th birthday, my mother organized a special trip to the art museum in the city, followed by lunch at a restaurant overlooking the river. Just the two of them, a grandmother-granddaughter outing that would have been unimaginable a year earlier. Perhaps most meaningful was the project they started together. A family recipe book illustrated with Riley's watercolors and my mother's calligraphy. Each recipe came with a story, some from the Williams family, some from Michael's side, and some from Riley's early memories of her birth family. "Food connects us across time and circumstance," my mother had written in the introduction. "These recipes tell our family story, all the branches, all the roots, all the grafted connections that make us who we are." One evening, as Michael and I watched from the kitchen doorway, Riley and my mother sat at our dining table surrounded by paintings and recipe cards, laughing over a cooking disaster story. "They look like they've always been close," Michael murmured, slipping his arm around my waist. "It's remarkable," I agreed. "Mom's finally found her authentic self." The journey had revealed painful truths about how unresolved trauma echoes through generations. My mother's childhood wound, discovering her adoption in such a traumatic way, had shaped her entire identity. Her desperate attempt to belong had manifested as rigidity about family, tradition, and bloodlines. The very thing she craved, genuine connection, had been sabotaged by her fear of being an outsider again. "Pain that isn't processed gets passed along," Dr. Brennan had observed in one of our sessions. Patricia's parents never helped her integrate her adoption story into her identity in a healthy way. Instead, they treated it as shameful, something to hide and never discuss. That unhealthy pattern might have continued indefinitely if not for the Christmas confrontation that forced everything into the open. As terrible as that moment had been, it had ultimately cracked open the protective shell my mother had built around herself for decades. My father had changed too, finding his voice after years of silent acquiescence. "I failed both Patricia and Riley by not speaking up sooner," he'd admitted during therapy. "I thought I was keeping the peace, but I was actually enabling harm." Now he consistently supported healthy communication, gently redirecting conversations when old patterns emerged and expressing his own feelings more openly. The ripple effects extended to Thomas and his family as well. After several frank conversations, Thomas acknowledged his role in maintaining the family's unhealthy dynamics. "I never challenged Mom's favoritism, because it benefited my kids," he admitted during a siblings-only dinner. "I'm sorry, Caitlin. I should have been a better brother to you and uncle to Riley." His wife Jessica had been instrumental in changing their family culture, ensuring their children developed genuine relationships with their cousin. The most recent family gathering had featured all the cousins playing board games together, with Riley fully included rather than sidelined. Michael's steady support throughout the entire process had deepened my appreciation for him. "You never wavered," I told him one night. "Not for a second. Riley is my daughter," he said simply. There was never a question of where I'd stand. As for Riley herself, she had blossomed. The temporary withdrawal following the Christmas incident had given way to a new confidence. Having successfully navigated such a painful family situation, and witnessed the adults in her life prioritize her well-being, had strengthened her sense of belonging. "I used to worry that I could be sent away if I made someone mad," she confessed during a family therapy session. "Now I know that real family doesn't work that way." My mother had cried at that statement, reaching for Riley's hand. "I'm so sorry I ever made you feel that way." "I know," Riley had replied simply. "That's why I can forgive you." One rainy Saturday afternoon, my mother stopped by unexpectedly. Riley was at a friend's house, and Michael was attending a work conference. "I wanted to talk to you alone," my mother explained, settling at the kitchen table while I made tea. She seemed nervous, running her finger along the wood grain. "I need to thank you," she finally said. "For what?" "For not giving up on me. For giving me the chance to know Riley, really know her." She looked up, her eyes damp. "She's extraordinary, Caitlin. And in many ways, she's helped me heal my own wounds." "How so?" I asked, genuinely curious. Seeing her embrace her adoption story with such openness and honesty, it's shown me another way to be. She smiled slightly. "At 72, I'm finally learning who I am beyond all the pretense. It's terrifying and liberating all at once." I reached across the table and took her hand. "I'm proud of you, Mom. Truly. The irony isn't lost on me," she said with a self-deprecating laugh. "All those years I spent clinging to the idea of blood connection, when the most profound relationship in my later years would be with my adopted granddaughter." Last week, we took a new family photo for the holiday card. Unlike previous years, where positioning had been strictly determined by my mother's sense of propriety, this arrangement was organic. Riley stood in the center, one arm linked with Patricia's, the other with mine. Michael and my father flanked us, everyone's smiles genuine. "This is my favorite picture ever," Riley declared when we reviewed the proofs. "Everyone looks real." It was true. No forced smiles, no rigid postures, just authentic connection. The lesson of our journey has been profound. Family is defined not by blood, but by love and choice. The bonds we forge through commitment and care are every bit as real, sometimes more real, than those created by genetics alone. Patricia's journey from rejection to acceptance had taught all of us that belonging is not about fitting a predetermined mold, but about creating space for each person's authentic self. That awful moment at last year's Christmas dinner, "You're not my granddaughter, get out," had been the catalyst for a transformation none of us could have predicted. The very wound that threatened to destroy our family ultimately led to its deepest healing. As I watch my mother and daughter now, heads bent together over a painting, I'm filled with gratitude for second chances and the courage to face painful truths. Our family story is still being written, but the narrative has fundamentally changed, from one of exclusion and rigid boundaries to one of inclusion and authentic connection. I wonder how many other families struggle with unspoken wounds and secrets that poison relationships across generations. What might be possible if we found the courage to bring those shadows into the light? If you've experienced family healing, or are still hoping for it, I'd love to hear your story in the comments below. Sometimes sharing our journeys helps others find their path forward. And if you found value in our story, please consider subscribing and sharing this video with someone who might need to hear that family healing is possible, even after devastating moments. The road isn't always straight or easy, but it's worth traveling. Thank you for witnessing our journey, and may you find healing in your own family story.